an hour, and this is a pretty important topic about things that we want to talk about. And I want you to know that the biggest part of this is hearing from you. And so I'm glad to see a good group here to express your concerns, your ideas, where you think we're headed, and where do you think we should go. Let me just throw out a couple of things to get the conversation started, and then I'm going to let the men and women in blue here have the microphone for a couple minutes, and then we'll turn to you. But I live up in the lower Yakima Valley, in the Sunnyside. I farm up there. I live in the rural part of the area, probably about 7 miles outside of town. And I have an interesting, I guess, opportunity to see things as they unfold, as time goes by and as things change. Because my duties in Washington, D.C., I leave for a week or 2 weeks or even sometimes 3 weeks at a time, and I can come back and say, oh, that's different. Look at how those hops have grown, or look how tall that corn is, or look at all that new graffiti over there on that water box, or on that road sign, or on that fence over there. My daughter actually works for the Yakima County Sheriff's Department, and she's been there for just over a year now. And I always knew that we had crime issues in the Yakima Valley, absolutely. But now I know a lot more than I ever knew before, because she comes home with stories all the time about what's going on. And I'm assuming, and maybe I won't make that assumption, but I think, from what I understand, crime is on the increase in all our communities. Rural, small communities, large communities, big cities, and it's not just the state of Washington, it's across the country. So it's an area of huge concern. There's some dynamics in the state of Washington that make us just a little bit different than other states and other communities. Some of the reaction in Washington state to I don't even know how to describe it, but over the last couple of years, as you've seen some of the instances of and accusations of police brutality, and some of the people that have died at the hands of law enforcement over the last couple of years, and the reaction to that, not only by members of the public, but by governing bodies, whether cities, counties, or state legislatures, and even the U.S. Congress. You've seen some of the actions that have been taken to hopefully prevent those kind of incidents from happening again. But also, I think what we've seen here in the state of Washington, the impact or the effect has actually been negative in that we've gone too far. And in my perspective, we've taken away the ability for these men and women who work very hard to keep our communities safe. We've taken away their ability to do their jobs to some degree. I'm interested to hear their perspective on that. That's my observation as a citizen of Yakima County and the state of Washington. I see the increase in crime. I get the opportunity to talk to law enforcement up and down the 4th Congressional District, and I hear stories from sheriffs, from deputies, from chiefs, in agencies in all 8 of the counties I represent. And I hear similar frustrations. These are very dedicated individuals. They're doing the best they possibly can to do their jobs, and I think we owe it to them to give them the resources and the tools to make them successful. Our safety depends on that. We all want to have safe communities. And so that's why I think this is a very, very important forum that we have tonight, a discussion to have, to hear from you, how you feel about things, and allow them also to give their perspectives. If changes are necessary, if you think things need to happen differently, then it's up to us as citizens to contact those people that make those decisions. And that's why I'm here as well. If there's something that I can do on the federal level, I want to hear from you and see what your ideas are. And also to encourage you to contact those on the state and the local levels as well. I think that's very important. They need to hear from us. Lawmakers, decision makers need to hear from you. And also, leadership in our police agencies, our law enforcement agencies need to hear from you as well. I know they do a very good job of keeping in touch with their communities. I think that's one thing that we can be very proud of in Eastern Washington. Our law enforcement agencies understood what community policing was before it became a buzzword over the last couple of years. We have, I think generally, overall, we have good relationships between our law enforcement and the community up and down Central Washington. I'm very proud about that. I know there's been a lot of work to go into that by the folks sitting in front of you, but also their predecessors, people that served prior to them. And so we're very fortunate about that. But it doesn't mean that everything's hunky-dory, right? And everything's perfect. Obviously not with the rates of crime the way they are. Something has to change. So I'm glad to see so many people here on short notice. This is an important topic, and I want to hear from you, your perspectives, and your opinions as well. And so with that, I'm going to allow these individuals to introduce themselves and let them make a few comments. And then, well, like I said, like I promised, we're going to turn to you as well. So I think it's probably appropriate that since we're in Richland, that we turn to the chief of the Richland Police Department, Chief Clary.
Thank you, Congressman, for having us here today, and thank you everybody for being here. My name is Brigit Clary. I'm the Chief of Police here in Richland. I had prepared some things to talk about here, but I'd much rather hear questions and concerns from the community and give you guys a chance to talk. So I figured we'll just go from there and see what your questions are.
I apologize for mispronouncing your name.
That's
Clary.
okay.
Clary, thank you. And you're fairly new, right? At least in the chief position, yeah.
I have about 25 years in law enforcement. I've been with the city of Richland for the last 5 years. So I do love it here in Richland and in the Tri-Cities. I spent the majority of my time in law enforcement on the west side. So I think that gives me a unique perspective on exactly how good we have it over here as far as community support and our working relationship with the other agencies in the Tri-Cities. We do a very good job of working together, and we all have a strong sense of community together. I do love the way that our community is outspoken and not afraid to tell us when we need to improve somewhere and give us a chance to do so, because we can't get better if we don't know. And as the Congressman said, we have many unique struggles right now, unprecedented in the times of law enforcement that have kind of led to a chain of events and changes for us. And I think we'll all agree that staffing is a big issue for us right now that we're dealing with. So, and I don't want to talk too long. I'll turn it over to the West Richland Chief here, Tom Grego.
Thank you, and welcome, and thank you guys for coming out tonight. We appreciate it. I'll kind of echo what Chief Clary said. It's as far as the partnership in the region is pretty unreal. I've been with West Richland for 25 years with reserve time too, but 22 years full time. I was promoted in May of this year, and even before, as I was making rank and worked with the rest of the region as a captain even, our partnership has always been super strong. I think we all know we count on each other to accomplish the mission of taking care of the communities and keeping us safe. So that's really about it as far as to get this going. I look forward to hearing your guys' comments and questions.
Chief. My name is Chris Guerrero. I'm the Chief of Police from the City of Kennewick, and once again I'd echo what the other two chiefs said. We have something very special here, and although you have the main cities represented, we can't go without saying the Benton County Sheriff, the Franklin County Sheriff, Yakima, Walla Walla. I know someone here from Moses Lake and Chief here. We have lots of dialogue with our entire Southeast Washington contingent of law enforcement. And when you speak about community, we all know that what occurs in Kennewick occurs in Richland. It occurs in Pasco. So community is the Tri-Cities as a whole, and that's how we all feel. It's not just Kennewick dealing with issues, it's all of us dealing together with issues, and that's how we approach it. We have meetings all the time with all of the regional law enforcement leaders, and it just isn't at our level, it's all the way throughout. We have mutual, different regional teams, Metro Drug Task Force, the Tri-Cities Regional SWAT Team. We have federal task forces out of Richland with our federal law enforcement partners. So we have all of it for the benefit of the community, and I think that's important to remember. We know that policing is not one piece of the justice system. It is, the community is the bigger piece to all of it, and we understand that here, just like the Congressman said. Community is what policing is about. So it's a partnership, it's just not us doing it. So again, thank you all for being here. I look forward to hearing from you. Turn it over to Chief.
I'm glad everybody is here. My name is Brent Cook. I'm the Deputy Chief for the City of Pasco. I've been with them for 33 years. I had some volunteer time before that. The City of Pasco, I think, is experiencing all the frustrations with change. And we've also learned a lot through the legislative changes about ourselves, about policing. It has been a time of growth, even though we're frustrated often with some of the outcomes. So from the Pasco perspective, what Chief Guerrero is describing is a benefit to everybody. The agencies in this region absolutely work together on all types of events, community events, crimes in progress. Regionally, the sharing of that information goes from the command staff down to the patrolman, and we just keep getting better at communicating with each other. So, thank you.
So, like I said, we don't have a lot of time. We just have an hour allotted to this, but so I want to be respectful of your time. And I know you've probably come with comments and questions or would like to present an opinion, and love to hear from anybody that has something on their mind. So if you need a microphone, we can absolutely get one to you.
What are the cities doing to address the homelessness? I mean, I've lived here 45 years, and I've never seen it as bad as it is now. I go to Beaverton, where my son lives. I got a family that lives in Seattle for the last 65 years. I don't want our community to become that. Just 2 blocks over here, we've got homeless going on. I've talked to code enforcement, I've talked to the Richland police, and went down to the police station. They can't do anything because we don't have a homeless shelter such as the Mission over in Pasco. And with the Supreme Court, which was said, if you don't have that, then they could live anywhere. And I said, so, and with that, it brings the drugs, and it brings the crime to go with it. It all goes hand in hand with that. So do we, as a community, need to, think in terms of what are we gonna do, or are we just gonna turn a blind eye to it? Because they're still over there, 2 blocks over, with Albertsons. I mean, when I moved here, it was a thriving grocery store. Now, you got a Richland High School, you got all these young, vulnerable, young teenage kids. Maybe they don't have a good family life or whatever, and they're attracted to that kind of behavior. What's the path forward on something like that? They're living behind the store, they're living in front of the store, and there's nothing that obviously can be done. So will it continue to grow? Is it gonna look like Portland? Is it gonna look like Seattle?
So I'll go ahead and start since you're mentioning a problem here in Richland. As you mentioned, as you kind of alluded to, it's a holistic response. It's not as simple as it used to be for law enforcement, and some of what Chief Cook alluded to there are some changes and growth that we have had to have as law enforcement as a result of the new laws. And we've had several court cases that have been key in the way that we approach these situations, like the Bell case, which effectively decriminalized some statutory crimes as a result of being homeless, the trespassing, the camping in the parks and those things like that. We can no longer enforce those if it occurs as a result of the person's living situation. And then we had the Blake decision, which in effect decriminalized drug possession. And so in the last legislative session, there was no action taken to remedy that law. So we're left with a possession of felony drugs is in effect no longer a crime. So it does present us with kind of a conundrum. We have to be a lot more creative, and it does take a holistic situation. The Tri-Cities as a whole is working on some other solutions, and as a city, our parks and facilities, they work on situations of getting people resources and helping clean up these areas. And we do, just today, we were out at the Albertsons, contacting the individual who was there and helping get them resources and encouraging them to move on. But it's a different approach than it has been in the past. And I can assure you that all the chiefs that are sitting here at the table, we are vested in, we don't want it to become like Portland or Seattle either. And we are working outside the box. We're willing to look at different solutions and approach things differently than we have in the past. But with law enforcement, we have to work within the constraints that we're given. We have to work with laws that we have. And all of us, our cities, at the city level, they're invested in this also. So we're trying very much to collaborate on that topic. So I'm going to let Chief Guerrero.
It's a great question, and I'll tell you, it's not, and most of you all know, it's just not Richland that's experiencing.
Exactly.
The entire Tri-Cities is experiencing what you're describing. One thing unique to the Tri-Cities that we don't have is any type of recovery center, no detox location. Hopefully you'll all hear more about that. There's regional groups together that include law enforcement in both Benton and Franklin County, looking at opening a recovery center that focuses on behavioral health, so the substance use disorder side as well as the mental health side. And those are some underlying issues with our homelessness problem. And like the chief said, there's a balance between the police getting involved in societal issues versus criminal issues. And some of the things we've learned through national legislation as well as ours in Washington State, not everybody wants the police involved in everything. So, like Chief Cook said, we have learned a lot. All the legislation and the national rhetoric around police, some things occurred thousands of miles away from here, but everybody who wears this badge is affected by that. We understand that. What we were really told is we need to do some things better. Now, did we do anything wrong necessarily? Maybe not here locally, but again, we're affected as a nation when you wear this badge. So we know that there's things we can do better with. And when you're deeply rooted in public concerns, like with what you're mentioning, it's hard to draw that line to say, no crime has occurred here, so we can't be involved. We still have an opportunity to get out and offer resources. Now, if somebody chooses not to take those resources, and jail's not the answer, that's where we get stuck. And something such as a recovery center.
As a taxpayer, we're putting out millions, $90 million for a new school. I mean, they're always looking for money for the schools, right? We got new schools going up left and right because we're growing. What are we doing for, something in this situation to look 10 years down the road? Are we going to end up with a bunch of tents down at Howard Amon and nobody wants to go down there anymore? Because people that I talk with, they don't want to go to Seattle. They don't wanna go see their kids and stuff, or bring their kids down there, and they don't wanna take their kids down to Portland and go see the big city and stuff. There's too much going on there, so they stay away. And then that city starts dying out. People start moving out of the suburb, into the suburbs. I just don't want that to happen here where, hey, it's a city park and there's nothing we can do. Our hands are tied because of this. So just let them be there. And then you got the needles, and then you get everything else that goes with it, right? All the negative with it. We gotta figure out what we're gonna do to get past this. Because if we just keep turning a blind eye and don't do anything, it will grow. It will get worse. You'll see a camper trailer there at Albertsons, and then you'll see another tent, and then another one, and it'll just keep growing. Over by Columbia Park Trail, over Ben Franklin Transit, they were starting to do that. And I talked to code enforcement, I talked to the Richland police, and then I had to go down to Ben Franklin Transit, and I said, since 1983, our tax has been subsidizing Ben Franklin Transit for the whole Tri-Cities. That's private property. If my wife goes to recycle and she gets raped, or my child's waiting at the bus stop and something happens, there's gonna be a big lawsuit going on here. Now, if it's private property like Walmart, they wanna put a motorhome there, whatever, that's on them. I can't do anything about that. But as a taxpayer, yes, we can do something in situations like that. But there needs to be a path forward to know where we're headed, because this is not a good direction to be headed in.
Yeah, you're right. And I don't think anybody would disagree with you. And the difference between public and private property, there's much more that can be done on private property versus public property. But I can tell you our councils, I know for the city of Kennewick, and I'm sure every council involved in the cities here share the same concern and are gonna do what we can.
And I realize your hands are tied at this point, but I mean, we gotta figure out as a community what direction we're gonna go in.
You bet, you bet.
I'm a teacher. I work in Pasco, and I could respond directly to some of your comments, and some of which I agree with, and some of which, as a teacher, I probably wouldn't. But I do see the problem. And I'd like to commend the Pasco police. I work right across the street from Court Street, and we have seen a reduction in homelessness there over the past 2 years, 3 years. But I read Michael Schellenberg's book, San Francisco. If you have not read that, you probably should. What laws, we don't see any representatives here, any state representatives. What laws should we be looking at? I mean, if it's a private property, public property, and you're like, our hands are tied, well, what laws should we be looking at to vote for those people? Because your hands obviously are tied. So if we have to start looking at politicians to vote in, what should we be looking at? You don't have to like endorse anybody, but should we be looking at drug remediation, or should we be looking at like homeless shelters? What should we be looking at?
I think, that's a great point about where we should be looking. I'm not sure anybody knows. I think the causes of our homelessness are very diverse about why somebody might be homeless, or without the means to stay somewhere other than their car or in a park. I know that in Pasco we're a little unique because we do have the shelter, which gives us an opportunity to place those people if they want to be. A lot of those people don't want to be placed. And when you ask them those reasons, they're not really clear, but they don't want to be somewhere. They want to be where they're at, which makes it even more difficult when they're choosing to take a sidewalk or Albertsons to do that. I think the resources that we're talking about, providing a facility that could help them perhaps clean up their health, their mental health, might help them be more inclined to want housing, to want help. I think we're on at least the path to try to get to a place where we have those resources available to us. Now, do we know if they're gonna work, right? People write books and perhaps they might. I don't know. When you talk to them on the street, there's a lot going on there. I think city councils can do a lot by supporting their municipal codes with rules for parks. Those kind of things that allow us maybe not to arrest somebody for camping in a park, but to make them leave the park during certain times of the day, where it's appropriate to be
Park's closed at midnight.
picnicking,
And if you're here,
whatever the park is designed for. It is not designed for
we
camping.
have campsites, right? I mean, if you want to camp, there are campsites.
I think that I'd add to that, just from my point of view and with the way we work in the region, that holistic approach goes a long way. Like you said, the chiefs have mentioned the facility in Kennewick, we're on that road of trying to get that done. Then there's the other part of this. I'm part of a board with veterans in the region, so they also have resources for homeless vets. So again, it's another piece of that puzzle for veterans that are struggling and stuff that are on the street too. So as a region, I think it's not just one simple solution. I think it's a lot. There's a lot of different things that we have to take a look at.
I just wanted to add to that because you specifically asked about laws, so I just wanted to give you a direct answer to that. And as I mentioned briefly before, with the Blake decision that effectively decriminalized simple possession of felony drugs, so that was not addressed in the last legislative session, and that law is due to sunset with the next one, and it really just needs to be remedied to include the knowingly part in the possession statute to make it constitutional. And so that would help. That would help us to have some enforcement ability there. And then also the last part of the reforms that was not addressed in the last session was our pursuit laws. And the way that they're currently written is that we don't have the ability to pursue in effect. And it's written so that it's very hard for us to comply, and it has to be under very certain specific circumstances. Our auto theft in the city of Richland is up over 500%. And criminals, people who are committing crimes will say as they drive away that they know we can't come after them, so they'll just simply drive away. What the other chiefs have said, I do think is very important, and I don't want to come across as just that we need more laws and more enforcement, because many times people who are affected by drugs, they need something other than just to be put in jail. So the whole piece with the resource centers, it's equally as important, but sometimes those enforcement arms help us in keeping our city cleaned up. They help the homelessness problem, because as we all know, we didn't have this problem 10 years ago. So it all goes hand in hand together with the police and the courts and the social services. Law enforcement is, just one piece of that.
I just want to add to that with the drug part too. Our drug court is pretty successful in the region. If I'm not able to arrest somebody to give them the opportunity to get the help, then it's not there. So I was an advocate of them trying to help out. And any of us that have been to the graduations from drug court would say it impacts people pretty well. Their system really does work for the people that want the help. So
It just seems like your hands are tied with can't pursue somebody and all that. I mean, you've got to have the tools to do your job, and they've literally taken the tools away from you guys, and that's unfortunate for the community as a whole.
Mario Diamond Social Media. This information that you're giving is something that I can tell you more than 80% of the Tri-Cities don't know. We don't know how bad your hands are tied, yet we have these little meetings like this. Why isn't that we can't be putting this more on a media level where people are consistently hearing why your hands are tied, and which would relieve you from having to do all the work, and allowing the community to come in and say, what can we do to help you, as opposed to just looking for a fix of some kind of building but get the people rallied. But we don't know why your hands are tied. Until today, I'm just now learning. I understand that the laws have changed. I understand some of the things have been taken away from you, but not to this level. And I want to know why not, and what can you do to make it publicly known?
Completely agree. And I think it's important that we as a profession need to be more transparent, but the last thing we like to be are complainers. So laws are put into place, our job is to enforce them. So it's the people's voice that we are enforcing or not enforcing. And that's why individuals like the Congressman having these forums are very, very important. But we try to tell a story out there about our organizations. Every group up here has social media, trying to highlight good work. But the last thing the police, any of us want to do is complain. So we have to balance transparency with complaining and what's been done, what some may think to tie our hands. That's the laws that people put in place, and our job is to enforce them. And so we have to balance that. But people's engagement, you all being here, this is where the change happens. And having open dialogue, call up your police departments, have dialogue, let us try to explain some things. But that's where the community and the police equal public safety, right? It's just not the safety with us, it's the public as well. That's where we come together. But you're exactly right. It's just trying to find that balance.
Can I just add on to what Chief Guerrero said? I think that's an important point that you bring up, and it's very important now more than ever for especially police chiefs and police leaders to be vocal and transparent, and which is why we're all here today. But at the same time, we can't be political. And with the last legislative session, the reforms to the reform laws that we had were because of people like you who spoke up and went to Olympia and were allowed voice with, we didn't get to vote on these laws because they weren't voted on, but the changes were made by people that were elected to do so. So that is the process, is to be aware of the law changes and to make your voice known to your state legislators, which is being done.
Going with that, I just want to say this, that, you know, when a crime has occurred, it comes out on the news, we hear all about it. When somebody gets away with a crime, we don't understand why. Like you said, people are ripping people, people are stealing people's cars, and we're watching you guys do what you gotta do, but then we see you driving away. We're like, why isn't he running after him anymore? And as opposed to going to a social media, this has nothing to do with politics, it has to do with what has happened. And that has been taken from us. And that's what I'm saying, is to be transparent. It may have to require you to be more in front of the TV, explaining in kindergarten terms, this is why we can't do this. And leave it at that. Let the people react to that. But at this point, people aren't reacting, they're frustrated because we don't understand your position. And I appreciate your work, by the way.
I think that last year, there was some crimes that were committed in the state that made the news about cops not chasing after what was going on. And I think it got a lot of attention, and I think that helped the change that happened this year. Because we hear, we see it, so I think the public spoke out. Obviously, the departments reacted and told the story, and then that's what the law did. So.
But I think you raise a really good point, and the fact is, and the chief here mentioned it, they are sworn to uphold the laws of the state, and they're not political figures in as far as lobbying for changes necessarily. Their job is to uphold those laws. This is the kind of exchange that can be very impactful for each one of you to talk to the lawmakers themselves, the legislature, the representatives, the senators, so that and that's valuable stuff. Let me tell you, after doing it for as long as I have, when you hear from constituents about an issue in the community, that's the kind of stuff that they are longing to hear and want to hear, so that they can try to change things. So
We're not very good storytellers. But we're learning. I know that the chiefs that are here during the legislative session put together a document that had stories in it, and I think that did impact them to hear the other side of that story. The person who was the victim's side of the story, not the police abuse story that we've been on. So I think we are learning. We're not very good at it, or we haven't been very good at it. We'll keep trying.
the gentleman back there was first.
Yes, Congressman, thank you. And everybody has a very good point, legislatively, talk to your legislators and that type of thing, but the difficult thing, after being a legislator, the difficult thing is that there is, the numbers just aren't there in Olympia for legislation to come through the way that the east side would like to see it. 57-41. I mean, it doesn't take too many. It doesn't take too long to figure out how that's going to go. I think that if we continue to let our legislators know, that's fine. But we have to let all the legislators know, because it's really that 57 who are the decision makers. The 41 are trying to get it done, and trying to work across the aisle, and trying to get what our people want. But it's very tough to be effective. My question has to do with the public safety tax. I know it's a Benton County public safety tax, which will be coming up again for vote. That public safety tax, 0.3% sales tax, is intrusive. And there are a couple of years back, it was like a lottery to give away the excess money that it accumulated. And so they went out and and they were able to dispose of the money to what was considered public safety. I'm wondering, the sheriff isn't here, but I was wondering, as far as the cities, what's your perspective on the Benton County public safety tax that's coming up, and how that can be best utilized? Thank you.
Well, I'll speak for West Richland. They put 3 officers on the road and everything that has to do with them and their training. If it doesn't get passed, I guess decisions need to be made by the politicians in my city about whether we're letting them go, those positions go or not. So it would be a huge impact for a department of 22. That's how many we have. So, which is below the standard even Washington State for officers per 1,000. West isn't there, so that would even bring us lower. So that's the West Richland story.
I can tell you for Kennewick, when the public safety sales tax was voted on in 2014 and went into place in 2015, we did what we said we were going to do, and that's hire 15 officers. Currently, we're authorized 108 commissioned officers, so you take 15 away from that. Also, it funded a assistant city attorney, as well as some support staff within our organization, and that's what we paid for, which was exactly what was put on the ballot at the time. And it is set to sunset at the end of 2024, and so I think, I know from the city of Kennewick, it would be a huge impact if we were to lose that public safety sales tax. We are already begun conversations about that with every jurisdictional entity within Benton County, having conversations about the need for that and recommendations to the commissioners for upcoming potential ballot language.
This would be a good place to insert Washington State. You guys can correct me if this isn't right. Is ranked 51st out of the 50 states in the District of Columbia for the number of law enforcement officers per 100,000 people, per 1,000 people. We have the lowest ratio.
I think it's 1.38 for the state, I believe I read.
And I think nationally it's 2.14 per thousand. So I think the city of Kennewick, we would be over 200 officers for the city of Kennewick. If we went off the national officer per thousand population, we'd be over 200 officers. Like I said, we're authorized to 108 right now.
And we'd be at 30 for 1.7 per thousand right now. Yes.
If I can just fill in a few gaps, and then I do have a few questions. With regards to the homelessness, that is actually, basically all of our hands are tied right now due to a United States court decision, and everyone's doing their best. There's $1.1 billion that was allocated by legislation. So what the cities, and I encourage you to work with your local government, city and county, to find a designated area, and there's so much money, there's so many grants out there, so that we can designate these people that are homeless for a multiplicity of reasons to certain areas where we can have that more affordable housing and have that homeless housing and that transitional housing. So that's what's working in my area and other areas as well, because it is a concern it's worldwide, it's not just in the nation. Dan, if you could possibly start working with the United States Department of Justice with regards to grants and or funding for body cams nationwide, I would very much so appreciate that.
We've been working on it to provide the resources that these guys need for body cams and a lot of other things.
Okay, yeah, because I'm still working on that too in my levels. And then I know that our governor also recently has opened up the door of opportunity to help out with the shortage of our police officers here in the state of Washington by opening up more recruitment centers. But I would kind of like to pick you guys' brains, probably not now because time's almost up, but with regards to some of the training being like online training like OSBI does for educational training. I think that would be a huge asset and a great investment and save money in the future. So we need legislation to change over the blade to include the intent knowingly. Is that correct?
That's the missing language.
Okay, do you know when that sunset clause expires?
I don't know the exact date.
Okay. And then I also would like to get the opportunity to pick you guys' brains with how we can balance out the pursuit laws, because a lot of what we're experiencing, unfortunately, had to do with George Floyd, and it trickled into our area, which we gotta spoil our officers in training and stuff, and I'm always allocating for more funding for different types of training and whatnot. And I am glad that legislation did backtrack on a lot of the original reforms in last legislative session, but I do agree that the continued pursuit laws and you guys not being able to pursue, it's got to be frustrating while criminals are laughing at you guys because you can't do anything about it. And that 500% increase in auto thefts that's unacceptable. I'm not okay with that. So I'll be advocating for those changes, but I kind of want to be able to know from you guys' perspective as well. Dan, can we also look into looking for federal funding with regards to recovery centers and further drug courts as well, so that because the drug courts here is showing success, I know in Brent County we're working on implementing that. Just in a lot of the smaller jurisdiction areas, one of the main issues is funding, and so I would like to be able to start opening up those doors of opportunity and start getting into those honeypots for increasing recovery centers in different areas, as well as the drug courts.
It's going to be very successful.
Huh?
The drug court is Been used now for how many years? Quite
Yeah,
some
like
time.
20.
Very successful, yeah.
And then if you guys have any questions for me, we'll exchange contact information.
Good.
Because I feel very passionately about what you guys do. I commend you for your services, all you blues and all different levels. And I share your same frustrations and concerns that you have. And I'm only here to help in whatever ways that I can, whether it be finding the funding, whether it be advocating through legislation to make those changes, because that's one of the issues. And I work well with Republicans and Democrats and can find that happy medium ground where lots of people, for some reason, have a hard time.
Thank you. So we're down to about 1 minute left. I see one hand up. Can you go to you real quick?
Yeah, real quick question. So I remember that staffing was an issue that you mentioned. Do you think that's a severe problem, or is that something that's just a problem? And what would you advise us voters about that issue, or is that an issue us voters should think about? I think Richland.
Chief Roske, you have a chance to speak?
Sure. Are you talking staffing for police officers, entry-level police officers?
Yeah.
Sure. Absolutely, it's a challenge locally, across the state, and across the country. Here's what I think all of us need you to do, everybody out here, is find candidates to apply for police officers. It's a great profession. It pays fairly well. It's a noble profession, and we need the very best, the most talented men and women to pursue this career. And we have got to stop the national rhetoric that seems to buy headline news, and we need each of you to go find your friends, relatives, brothers, sisters to apply for us, apply for all of our agencies. Every one of us has openings out here. And so anything that you can do, it's back on all of us as a community. We aren't just raising police officers in Michigan somewhere on some farm and putting them across the cities. They're coming from you. We are you and you are us. So we need each of you to do that for us. Thank you.
Good question. Well, Chief, that was a good way to end this. I appreciate everybody coming tonight. I really do. I think the next opportunity we have to do that, maybe we should invite some of the local legislators. That would be, since a lot of this impacts them, and they need to hear some of these things, these concerns that are brought up. But do you have something real quick?
I just have something to say once you're done.
Okay. I just want to say thank you to you for being here, but thanks to the men and women in blue here with me for doing what you do to keep our communities safe. And if you could, I'd like to give them a round of applause.